Every year, I try to get eyes on as many games as I can in hopes of spotting every single one with excellent animation from that calendar year. And then I make a video like this one to make sure the rest of you know about them. This process has gotten out of hand, but I don't know how to stop. I was gonna try to tally the number of games I'd examined this year, just out of morbid curiosity, but then I hit 4 digits and I decided I did not want to know anymore. If you happen to know of an official term for whatever condition or personal failing is causing me to do this, please keep it to yourself. And with that, here's all the best game animation that dropped in 2025, starting with... As usual, we begin with the 2D contenders, be they traditional, skeletal, question mark, and also, as usual, there's an incredible variety to celebrate, from the sharp edges and sharp timing of possessors to the rounded shapes and splashy effects work of Constance. From the 80s Disney and Bluth-inspired stylings of Bye Sweet Carol to the much simpler but still extremely expressive and entertaining WarioWare antics of Consume Me. It does warm my heart seeing the arguably oldest form of animation continue to thrive in the medium of games. And while 2025 might not have been quite as jam-packed as previous years, the standouts are a sight to behold. Let us begin with Absolem. After spending so many years working their magic on other people's intellectual property, it is very exciting to see the folks at Guard Crush and .emu get to spin up something of their very own. Absolem, if you've not tried it, is a hybrid of beat-em-up and roguelike, with art and animation work provided by a crew over at Supamonks. If I'm not mistaken, it's this production company's first time dabbling in gameplay animation, but the results are spectacular. They've really made this comic book-inspired look sing in motion, from the character animation, to the effects animation, to all the subtle ways they've added life to these gorgeous environments. It's all so aesthetically cohesive. This game's animation is responsive, punchy, and drenched in comic style. It is simply some of the finest beat-em-up animation work to be seen anywhere. French animators, man. Out of control. But while I'm on the subject of new original projects coming from places you wouldn't expect, now seems the perfect time to bring up Dear Me, I Was. I'm guessing a lot of you aren't familiar with this one, so here's what you need to know. First, this is a short narrative game about reflecting on one's life, told entirely visually with no text whatsoever. Second, its intended audience is primarily adult women, which is a demographic this business so rarely prioritizes. Third, it was created by a small team within a relatively large game studio. And fourth, that large studio is Arc System Works. Yeah, that one. Dear Me, I Was deploys a loose, hand-drawn style of rotoscoped animation and watercolor that will probably look familiar to anybody who played Hotel Dusk, which is one of art director Taisuke Kanasaki's previous works. It's very limited in terms of drawings per second, largely consisting of held poses and short snippets of rotoscoped performance, but those brief moments capture some lovely glimpses of emotion and human connection. Interactivity is a bit lighter than I'd have hoped, but even so, this is a beautiful little narrative experience they've created, and it just makes me happy seeing this sort of small artistic experiment emerge from such a large studio, especially one that's generally known for making games so radically unlike this in every way. I wish we saw this kind of thing happen more often. But speaking of beautiful things that I wish could happen more often, let us continue to celebrate the arrival of Hollow Knight Silksong. As I discussed at length in a previous video, effects animation pulled a lot of weight in Hollow Knight, lending the game not just spectacle but clarity, without which the game's punishing, fast-paced combat simply could not function. And of course, this is even more true here in this even more challenging sequel, but there is so much more to appreciate here than just excellent effects work. Keeping these character designs simple and relatively quick to draw has to be one of the smartest art design decisions Ari Gibson ever made, because the quantity of animation he has produced for this enormous game is just staggering. So many little bug characters, so many little flourishes in Hornet's moveset, and so many lovingly animated details in every nook and cranny of this world. And it really cannot be said enough how incredibly well animated enemies in this game are. not just in terms of their movement being beautiful to look at, but in providing visual feedback and telegraphing incoming danger. These battles are so quick and so dangerous, and yet every one of these enemies not only provides clear signals to every attack, but does so while displaying a wide range of personality. Very few games contain boss fights as tightly designed and effectively animated as these, let alone this many of them. This game has been a treat, and I am thrilled to note that there's more of it coming. But we are not quite done with 2D yet. Not until we have all basked in the hand-drawn splendor of Shinobi: Art of Vengeance. While .emu and Guard Crush, the design and engineering talents behind Streets of Rage 4, were hard at work on Absolem, Lizard Cube, the art and animation talents behind Streets of Rage 4, were busy on this, as you can see. Just look at this. How well it flows, the exaggeration in the posing, how well it all conveys force and agility. I could watch this character's animation in slow motion all day. It's just stunning. And not just your character, it's all great. The enemy movesets, these beautifully animated smears and flash effects on each attack, the amount of detail and moving cloth on some of these characters, it's like the stylistic opposite of Silk Song. Dense with detailed complexity, but no less cohesive, snappy to control, or appealing to look at. French animators, man. But please pick up your jaws off the floor and come along, because we've got a lot of other games to cover. Another year, another flood of games with cool pixel animation from around the world. And though the last couple of years have set a pretty bonkers standard for quality in this category, I am pleased to say that 2025 contains a great many highlights. We got The Drifter, a point-and-click adventure that mostly keeps the character animation simple but creates some incredible mood with the way animated light plays across its environments. We got Force Strike, a combat puzzle roguelike with some great pose work and punchy hit stop that makes a perfectly executed fight sequence feel incredible. We got Bugaboo Pocket, a Tamagotchi-style game with some surprisingly charming insect animation, especially when you give them little bug pets. We got Urban Myth Dissolution Center, a game deploying various limited animation techniques to such great effect that sometimes it's easy to forget that this is technically a visual novel. We also got Mainframes, a platformer with a main character design that is simple but still incredibly expressive and appealing in motion. Look at that squash and stretch. I love this little guy. And it was also a very good year for pixel games that remind you how great the GBA could look. Pipistrello and the Cursed Yo-Yo is like stumbling upon a Game Boy Advance gem that the world somehow forgot about, with animation that is snappy and just feels fantastic in your hands. But also, there's Shantae Advance Risky's Revolution, a game literally intended to be released on the GBA back when Waypoint started making it 20 years ago. Long story. But while I'm on the subject of retro aesthetics, Xenovia Interactive is back, and I will be darned if you people fail to notice. Get a load of Neon Inferno. When I stumbled upon Steel Assault back in 2021, I immediately knew two things. One, this is definitely going in my best game animation of 2021 video. And two, I am clearly going to need to keep tabs on this studio's work from now on. Today, in 2025, 6, whatever, I can now confirm that 1, I did put it in that video, and 2, keeping tabs on Xenovia Interactive was the right call. Like Steel Assault, Neon Inferno is quarter-munchingly hard. But also like Steel Assault, it is a feast for the eyes, rich with animated detail, and though it's obviously not strictly adhering to the technical limitations of older gaming hardware, it absolutely captures the essence of a 90s arcade run and gun. Admittedly, I think some of the character animation choices are stronger than others. Like, I'm sure there is a reason behind the choice to have them holding their guns this low with these awkwardly bent elbows while riding your motorcycle, but that doesn't really stop it looking silly. Even so, it feels equally silly to fixate on fine details like that when the bigger picture is working so well. The animation on every enemy, the explosion and smoke effects, the handling of dynamic environmental light in general, it just looks incredible. In summary, keeping tabs on Xenovia Interactive was a good idea, and I would encourage anyone to do the same. While we're still enjoying some arcade nostalgia though, I would now like to direct your attention to Marvel Cosmic Invasion. Shredder's Revenge came out 3 years ago, and it was all the proof you need that Tribute Games is the perfect studio to entrust with this specific kind of retro revival. And the animation work in Cosmic Invasion is every bit as successful. It nails the dynamic, exaggerated action posing of the comic book source material. It creates plenty of contrast between the movesets of each playable character, helping everybody in this giant 15-person playable roster to feel appropriately distinct in their stance and movement and attacks. And it provides that classic, punchy game feel that every good beat-em-up requires. It's just rock-solid work. This animation is delivering on every single thing this game needs it to. Whatever the folks at Tribute Games have their sights set on next, I'm excited to find out. But before we move on from the realm of the pixel, one noteworthy 2025 release remains, and that is Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. Spanish indie studio The Game Kitchen has some incredible artists on staff, as anyone who has so much as glanced at Blasphemous can tell you. Their games contain some of the richest pixel art you will find anywhere. Detailed, evocative, and, no doubt, daunting to try to animate. And it is very cool seeing how, even when working within the constraints of someone else's established franchise, Game Kitchen's stylistic fingerprints are clear to see. The feel of play and the character's speed, agility, and posing, that's all classic Ninja Gaiden, instantly recognizable. But the detail in these character designs and the way they look in motion is Game Kitchen all the way through. Now, I love that this studio built its success upon original creations. In fact, they released another one in 2025, Stone of Madness. But I must admit, it is very cool seeing what a familiar classic franchise can look like when filtered through a team with such a distinctly recognizable house style. Fantastic work. But our time in the realm of the pixel is now over. Except not entirely, because now it's time for... I should just start calling this section what it actually is, the I can't decide where else to put this category. For example, Goodnight Universe is a 3D game with some very nice first-person work on the camera and the hands that really captures that unsteady, fumbling movement of a baby just starting to develop basic motor skills. But then there's also some supplemental 2D animated elements scattered throughout the experience, and they add a lot, so I guess it goes here. Or consider Hades 2, which might not be pre-rendering their 3D characters as 2D sprites anymore, at least I don't think so. But it does still contain a lot of 2D elements, like all of these incredible effects in battle and the plethora of environmental elements adding life to every location. And though the 3D character animation is all very good, I feel like those 2D elements kinda steal the show. So I guess it goes here too. Then there's Eclipsium, which contains some of the most stunning nightmare imagery I have seen in any video game. And it's all 3D, with some very clever shader work, except for your first-person hands, which are just somebody's hands filmed on a green screen. Is that a 2D element, then? Technically? Live action? I don't know. And what about Rhythm Doctor? Pixel animation, right? Well, that's what it wants you to think, but then it starts doing... I don't even know what to call this. It's amazing, but I don't know. Welcome to this category. And speaking of delightful things which defy straightforward categorization, we may as well start with morsels. If you have played Nidhogg 2 or Atomicrops, then you will no doubt recognize the wonderfully cute, gross artwork of Toby Dixon. Morsels is a top-down shooter roguelike in the vein of Binding of Isaac or Nuclear Throne, and I can't decide whether its animation would be more accurately categorized as pixel or 2D. But then there's also some 3D stuff in here sometimes, so fine, into this category it goes. Whatever you want to call it, it is a treat. I love this menagerie of bizarre NPCs and vendors and bosses you encounter along the way. But look at this thing. And this guy. Or this one. I hope you're not waiting for an explanation from me, because I don't understand what's going on here any more than you do. But perhaps even more, I love the animation on your little player characters. They are very tiny, not nearly as eye-catching or detailed as the larger NPCs we were just looking at, but the simple bouncy movement on these little weirdos is so full of character. So much personality expressed using so little. I love them. Ooh, and speaking of personality, weirdos, and absurdity, brace yourself for a formidable dose of all three. I give you Enna, Dream Barbecue. Enna, if you have not yet been introduced, is a surreal animated web series created by Peruvian animator Joel Guerra. A handful of episodes have been released over the last 6 years. You can see them all here on YouTube if you like. But this year, we got the first chapter in an episodic Enna game, and the wild variety of character designs and animation styles showcased within more than lives up to the series' reputation. This will not be for everyone. Surrealist art never is, and that's okay. But for an animator, it is hard not to be charmed by the playfulness here. It is sometimes comical, sometimes disconcerting, often both at once, always expressive and just bursting with off-kilter personality that manages to feel specific and intentional, but also disorienting and difficult to define. There's nothing else quite like it in games, and let me tell you, when you have been looking through hundreds and thousands of new games and you are seeing the same handful of art and animation styles used over and over and over, something as creative and confidently unusual as this is a breath of fresh air. But we've got one more uncooperative gremlin to discuss in this grab bag, and that game is Unbeatable. Unbeatable is a rhythm adventure fueled by rock, late 90s anime, and a degree of ambition that I really admire. Even if you were to just look at the more traditional hit-the-notes-on-beat arcade mode that functions as this game's foundation, this would already merit a place in this video. Snappy character animation, great effects work, some nice punchy screen shakes and tilts to ramp up the kinetic energy of every successfully hit note. It looks great, feels great, style already off the charts, love it. But then you add the campaign mode, and the scope of this thing just explodes. Tons more characters to animate, a bunch of Rhythm Heaven-style minigames peppered throughout, a not insignificant number of hand-animated cinematics that look great for an indie production. Even in the places where that ambition overextends into a rough edge, those imperfections still feel right at home in this game's spirit of punk enthusiasm. My congratulations to the folks at D-Cell for getting this one across the finish line. It's really something special. And actually, as long as we're celebrating the spirit of resistance here, that reminds me. If you are not already aware, there's currently a boycott of Xbox games happening in protest of Microsoft's ongoing business partnership with the Israeli military, directly contributing to the surveillance and genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Not great. The folks at People Make Games have an excellent video on this if you'd like to learn more, but in support of this boycott, there's a handful of 2025 games that I'm going to be leaving out of this video for now. Once Microsoft has fully withdrawn from these business dealings and the boycott ends, then I will release an updated version. Until that time, I would just like to say to my peers at studios like Double Fine, Platinum, id Software, and Compulsion Games, y'all created some phenomenal animation work last year. You should be very proud of what you've achieved, and I look forward to eventually giving that work the full acknowledgement it deserves. And I'm sorry that your publisher/parent company is like this. Anyway, moving on, we've got another category to get to. Naturalistic 3D might not be a category where you'll find much variety in terms of animation style. I mean, by definition, these games are all aiming for some degree of realism. But even with that shared aesthetic goal, the animation in each of these games tends to excel in different specific areas. For example, Battlefield 6 particularly shines in first person, containing some of the finest first-person weapon handling to be found. From the Ashes, the surprise expansion to 2023's Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora not only contains some great Na'vi character performances, but also some excellent creature animation work. Ghost of Yote raises the bar over its predecessor in a lot of ways, but particularly excels in third-person combat, with some very satisfying swordplay. And Eric's Home, the Stolen Dreams animation shines brightest in cinematics, featuring some impressive performance capture work for such a relatively small-scale production. But if we're going to talk quality cinematics work, then it's time to pay tribute to Mafia: The Old Country. Hangar 13's gameplay animation crew has done a lot of excellent work here. Locomotion, knife combat, horse riding, the whole deal. But very few studios, even in the AAA space, can match what this cinematics team manages to deliver in-engine. There are so many ways a cinematic sequence can fail to come together as intended. And it's all the same things that can wreck an animated film. Maybe it's a weak script, or a weak performance, poor direction, poor planning, poor casting, bad lighting, bad scene pacing, executive meddling. So many things can go wrong, and that's even before you get into the video game side of things, where a nigh endless number of technical problems could still sabotage your efforts, even if you did everything else right. But Hangar 13 keeps making that daunting challenge look effortless. They cast well, they direct well, their actors put in great work, and the animation team does a fantastic job of preserving and emphasizing the subtleties of those performances. They are very good at this over there, and I think their achievements deserve more recognition. It usually takes a lot of resources to deliver a game full of naturalistic 3D animation at a high level of quality like this. So, when some team manages to pull it off without access to all of those expensive resources, that success is all the more surprising. Which, of course, brings us to Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. High-fidelity cinematics are a lot of work. Conversation systems that can support many hours of dialogue scenes are a lot of work. Turn-based combat with lots of playable characters and enemy types is a lot of work, especially when that turn-based system involves a dodge or parry mechanic, because that means that the entire combat system now depends on the quality and clarity of enemy attack animations. These are very ambitious things to attempt with only a dozen animators on hand. And, in truth, that smaller team size does show in a few places. These conversation sequences have very little animation variety or face animation to work with, and even the higher quality cinematics are not as polished as what you would see in a larger production. You'll spot the occasional dead-eyed expression, awkward hand pose, or failure to actually hold props with both hands. Become an animator, you too can be cursed with an eye for inconsequential flaws such as these. But ultimately, none of those nitpicks count for much when this game's animation, for all of its limitations, is still managing to do so much right. The vast majority of these many enemy attack animations do successfully telegraph dodge timing, and these cinematics are so well performed and well directed that the emotional punch of every beat lands exactly as intended, often with even more dramatic impact than most of its bigger budget contemporaries manage. Even without AAA levels of polish, Expedition 33's animation achieves everything its gameplay and story need from it. And where it matters most, the animation succeeds with flying colors. Big congrats to everybody at Sandfall, and to their external animation crew. Y'all really achieved something extraordinary. But on the subject of surprisingly large things, we have a returning champion to celebrate in Monster Hunter Wilds. I cannot imagine a new Monster Hunter game coming out and not appearing in one of these videos. It hasn't happened since I started making these in 2018, and at this point, I don't think it's going to, because the animation in Monster Hunter games is just consistently incredible. Player character traversal and combat are just stellar. Every weapon feels hefty and powerful, with combos that flow together beautifully. The mount riding animation system they've built is amazing, and nobody in video games does creature animation better than this team. These monster designs are inventive. Their movement feels loosely grounded in natural body mechanics and believable animal behavior, but at the same time, those behaviors are exaggerated. Their movements punched up, not only to amplify each monster's unique characteristics and traits, but also to improve the feel of play, providing the player heaps of visual cues to help us intuit our target's current state and intentions, slowly helping us learn to better read their behaviors and respond accordingly, ultimately turning us into better hunters. But it's not just the big monsters. Some of this game's most impressive details take place in the simulated ecology surrounding you. All these little creature behaviors happening in the nooks and crannies. Herds running from incoming threats. Scavengers gathering to pick at leftover carcasses. Wildlife nesting in the trees. This team's dedication to creating the illusion of a dynamic, living ecosystem that shifts and responds to changes around it is just remarkable. Like, did you know that this healer cat runs all the way back to base camp after reviving you if you actually follow it? Few franchises dedicate themselves to building a tapestry of intricately animated background detail like Monster Hunter, and I adore them for that. I was prepared to dock some points on account of the food cutscenes not involving cat meal prep or delivery, but now the Gathering Hub exists, so we're covered. That was kinda close though, y'all had me worried. But speaking of anxiety, let's talk about Silent Hill F. This game's animation gets a lot of things right. Like most of the others in this category, Silent Hill makes some very effective use of performance capture technology to deliver cinematic performances that are cohesive, nuanced, and just the right amount of uncanny to keep you on edge. The game also succeeds in delivering some very unsettling body horror, but I think that this game's biggest animation strength is in its creepy and wonderfully weird monster animation. Silent Hill has given us its share of horrors that stagger, crawl, or stumble toward us in memorably menacing ways, but I feel like this animation crew has really stepped up the creativity on enemy movement, giving a lot of these monsters so much more unique menace than their design could possibly convey on its own. From the slow, hopscotch approach of this amalgamation, to the beautifully crafted posing on these scarecrow nightmares, to these creepy things, which might be my favorite actually. Like, I've seen plenty of incarnations of the living mannequin or living puppet idea, moving in unnaturally mechanical or staccato ways, but rarely so effective as this. This wild pose, the way the limbs and the joints rotate in such impossible and unpredictable ways, the way it goes so suddenly, unnaturally still sometimes, isolating movement to a single joint or limb in ways that humans just cannot perfectly do even if we try. It's superb work. But before we move on from this category, we have got one more AAA titan to honor, and that is Death Stranding 2. I can't not love this. I don't have a say in the matter. There's just so much animation to praise here. Most video games contain some kind of walking or running animation. Your average AAA game contains a lot of it. Coverage for walking, turning, or pivoting in any direction at any speed. But very few games build so much mechanical importance into the finer details of walking. In walking across different types of terrain. In walking at varying levels of encumbrance. In the importance of maintaining balance. In navigating slopes, wading through water, or whatever this is. Locomotion and traversal are uniquely important to Death Stranding's very foundation, and this is a suitably dense, nuanced locomotion and traversal animation system. Plus, the cinematic work. Again, most of the games I've talked about in this category involve performance capture, but this is easily the most polished PCAP work I've seen in a game this year. You have got a bunch of excellent actors here delivering maybe not the greatest acting of their careers, but darned impressive work considering the material. I can't imagine most of them understand what's happening in half of these scenes any better than we do. And the camera. I don't talk camera animation much here, but wow, this is some remarkably polished camera work, both in cinematics and gameplay. And on top of all of that, they went and added a character who is a puppet, and he's animated at a reduced frame rate to evoke the feel of stop motion. Like I said, I can't not love this. Kojima has given me no choice. Big budget games that are genuinely strange, taking these big bizarre swings and not trying to be for the broadest audience possible, are a rare thing these days, nearly extinct. Kojima Productions are one of the last bastions of AAA weird. A team stacked with incredible technical talent, commanding enormous budgets, knowingly dedicating that mountain of resources to making something that absolutely will not be to many people's tastes. I can't not love that. But one category still remains. This category is always pretty stacked, but 2025's crop is actually out of control. There are simply too many, so let me give you a rapid-fire sampling. We got this exceptional sandboarding animation system in Sword of the Sea. We got some very satisfying soulsy combat from the first Berserker, Kazan. Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic brought us this Jack-in-the-Box monster with springy limb animation that is on point. Titans of the Tide continued the ongoing tradition of 3D SpongeBob SquarePants games having surprisingly good cartoony animation. We got Kirby Air Riders, which somehow maintains all of the stylistic sensibilities and functional clarity of Smash Bros. Animation, despite being in a completely different genre. I love it. I also love the very fun, very stylish high-speed platforming we got in Haste. Although I'd have to say, my favorite stylized player locomotion award definitely goes to Hyperbeat. Not because it's complex or mind-blowing in some way, but come on, it's hard to stylize a walk further than this. But if we are going to talk about unconventional character movement, then we absolutely must talk about To a T. The latest project from Katamari creator Keita Takahashi, to a T, is a story about a child who has to navigate life while permanently stuck in this T-pose. And I love this. Not just because it's a delightful time, but because the entire premise of this game is animation reliant. This story doesn't work without animation selling the challenge of performing basic daily actions with your arms stuck like this. Eating breakfast. Getting dressed. Brushing teeth. Walking down a sidewalk without clotheslining people. Even something as basic as opening and closing doors requires an unconventional solution. And I love seeing this character's animation deliver on that premise. Never getting too bogged down in depicting these activities with literal realism, but always adhering to the established rules about this character's limitations. Speaking of characters with limitations, though, I have a teeny tiny clown to introduce you to. Meet Poco. Poco is a tiny little point-and-click adventure about a tiny clown who is jettisoned from the circus after failing clown tryouts and must seek help from the denizens below to get back up there. It is a very small game with a very small number of characters, but what animation it has is so fun. Character movement in this game is always entertaining. The animation on this clownsel of judges? Impeccable. Your little clown's bouncy locomotion? Adorable. The movement of all of these weirdos you meet down here, bizarre, but packed with personality. Even your little cursor hand is entertaining, doing different animations to signal the specific interaction that'll happen should you click. Do you want to walk to this adjoining area? No? Maybe you'd like to talk to this thing. It's just cute. Poco really shows how much even a small quantity of great animation can add, even to what is ultimately a very simple gameplay experience. But we are not done talking about tiny cartoony heroes, because next up is Big Helmet Heroes. This beat-em-up has some of the most appealing bouncy 3D cartoon motion I have seen all year. Every single thing these little knights do is so well crafted and fun to look at. From the squash and stretch on their jumps, to the satisfyingly snappy timing of their attacks, to even just the overlapping bounce on their head and their arms as they run around, every movement is so appealing. This game's animation is not doing anything revolutionary. Its scope is quite reasonable, and the animation techniques being deployed here have existed in some form for longer than literally anybody watching this video right now. It's just some darned high-quality animation work that is entertaining enough to elevate the entire game around it. French animators, man. But not all the games in this category are tiny ones, I assure you. Some of them are surprisingly large, in fact. For example, Mario Kart World. This is the best animated Mario Kart game, and it is not a close contest. In fairness, kart racers are not the sort of genre that tend to need a lot of high-quality animation. But yes, animation can make some very important contributions to clarity and game feel and all of that, but at the end of the day, all the characters are still going to be facing away from you 95% of the time. And past Mario Kart games have had some fine animation in them, but the escalation here is way more than I expected. This subtle squashing and stretching they've added to your character, and the cartoon malleability they've added to your entire cart as you hop and skid around turns looks so nice. And the way that they've put so much more into these characters' faces, so that the eyes never look dead, and every character can more robustly express their personality throughout. Which is all the more impressive given just how many playable characters there are in this. Like, yes, you are still looking at the back of their head most of the time, but when you do get to see these characters' faces, there is way more appealing life there than before. Nintendo has really been pushing animation quality lately, and if you require further evidence, I have just the thing. Donkey Kong Bonanza. Deep down, I think all of us instinctively understand that it's not truly Donkey Kong unless the art and animation are at least a little bit cursed. Not a lot cursed, just a bit, like 5 to 10% cursed. So they pretty much nailed it. But as I was saying, you can always rely on Nintendo's games having rock-solid animation fundamentals where function is concerned. Clarity, responsiveness, game feel, they're great at it, and Bonanza is no exception. The moment-to-moment play of punching and climbing your way through this ridiculous world looks and feels as great as you would expect from a Nintendo title. But the level of animated appeal in Nintendo's first-party titles, the efforts toward more appealing motion or more appealing expressions, the kind of stuff that makes you sit up and say, "Wow, I love the way that animation looks," that has historically been less consistent in Nintendo's games. Like, the animation is never bad. Sometimes it's excellent, but most often it's decent. You know, pretty good. That has really started to change in more recent releases, though, and Bonanza is yet another sign of Nintendo's in-house teams stepping up their game. This is such an expressive DK. His eyes, these mouth shapes, the variety of silly and extreme expressions this rig is capable of. It simultaneously feels like a new take on the character and an evolution of the work that Rare and Retro Studios have been doing with DK for the last 3 decades. It is simply the best animated Donkey Kong we have ever seen in a game to date. I don't know what prompted Nintendo's core teams to make animation a higher priority like this, but I'm loving it and I really hope it continues. Now, so far in this category, we've looked at a lot of games dealing in various cartoony flavors of animation, but stylization comes in many different forms. And in 2025, one unusually popular source of stylistic inspiration was stop motion. And whatever the reason might be for that, I'm sure not complaining, because it led to some of the coolest looking games of the entire year. Case in point, The Midnight Walk. There are quite a few games in recent years which have tried to tap into the look and unique appeal of stop-motion film. Some simply try to mimic the aesthetic of it, while others attempt to incorporate elements which were actually physically animated using stop-motion techniques. But I don't feel like many games truly capture the essence of this form of animation quite like The Midnight Walk. Part of it is no doubt the game's eerie vibe, which is reminiscent of some of the best stop-motion films, and part of it is probably the fact that most, if not all, of these characters and creatures are actually physically sculpted objects which have been scanned, reproduced, and then animated digitally. Part of it is certainly their approach to lighting and rendering and depth of field and so on, but so much of it is in the quality of movement itself. The choppier feel of animation updating at a lower frame rate, the absence of that perfect smoothness that 3D animation just really wants to make everything have. You really feel like you could reach out and touch so many of these objects and characters on screen. I'm struggling to think of another game that has captured the look and the vibe of stop-motion film so effectively as this. Not that I wouldn't love to see another one try. But speaking of games heavily influenced by film and TV, we should talk about Dispatch. Not only do we get a revival of the Telltale-style, episodic, choose-your-own-adventure game, and a very good one at that, but we get one with some exceptionally high-quality character animation. These performances are expressive, well-staged, well-acted, well-directed, and the character animation just nails the comedy this game is going for, whether it's slapstick physical gags or the precise timing in a joke delivery. The level of animation quality here is darned impressive, closer to the caliber of a well-funded TV series than anything we've seen in this genre of episodic game before. And this makes sense because it basically is an interactive TV series. Every single scene is pre-rendered, and they were all animated by a crew at Igloo, an animation studio in Thailand. If you've looked at the credits on this game and thought that it kinda looks like a TV series production with a small game studio attached, there's a reason for that. But I do not mean to suggest that this is a bad thing. If anything, embracing this production approach works to Dispatch's benefit. By stripping away superfluous interactivity and removing any unpredictable gameplay variables that Dispatch's animation would otherwise need to account for, they have allowed the animators to instead focus their full attention on the sorts of priorities that a film animator specializes in: acting, staging, and polish. This would not work for most kinds of game, but for this specific kind of game, the results speak for themselves. Big congrats to the devs at Ad Hoc, but especially the animation team at Igloo. Y'all have taken a near-dead genre and made people excited about it again to a degree that I would not have thought possible. Now, I know that Dispatch kinda caught all of us by surprise, but let me tell you about another little surprise that you probably didn't hear about. Dog Walk. Dog Walk is a tiny little game in which a boy and his dog look for items to decorate a snowman with, and you control the dog. This game was created by Blender Studio, seemingly as a sort of tech initiative to improve the pipeline between their open-source 3D software, Blender, and the open-source game engine Godot. They released a bunch of dev diaries about the project over on their channel if you want to look into it further. But what they have created here is a lovely little thing, packed with all these adorable little animation ideas and touches. Like the way that the kid can't quite keep up with your running speed, or the way that you can lead this poor child into all kinds of hazards and obstacles. These character designs are amazing and animated in a specific kind of style that we don't see in games super often. It's just an adorable concept done very well. It's also free, by the way. You can just go download it on Steam right now. Nobody's gonna stop you. But somehow, after all of this, one game still needs to be celebrated, and that is Wanderstop. This is a game about making tea and hopefully learning to let yourself rest. And the character animation is just wonderful. Especially when it comes to relatively small indie productions, I am always so delighted to see this kind of attention to character. This story of a warrior afraid to slow down and a tea maker trying to help would not hit the same way without animation selling those characters and emotions so vividly. And it's done so efficiently too. This game achieves so much with a handful of looping poses and conversational gestures. Every character has their own animation for drinking a cup of tea, and every one of those tea drinking animations communicates who that person is with immediate clarity. Also, these are pluffins. You can pick them up, and if they happen to have stolen something, you can shake them around like a rag doll to make them drop it. And that is an inspired animation idea. Game animation at any scale is an art of achieving as much as you can with what resources you have, of figuring out where animation can provide the most benefit for your specific game experience, and trying to find how you can most efficiently pursue that with the people, tools, and time you have, of getting the most bang for however much buck is available. And this is a shining example of a game with relatively few resources to spend, budgeting them in exactly the right places for maximum effect. It's wonderful work. But alongside all of these well-deserved congratulations, I also want to, yet again, extend my condolences to just about everybody working in this industry right now. Whether you're currently out of work or merely watching friends laid off all around you, it is not a fun time to be working in this business, and I am very sorry to any of you who might be going through the worst of it right now. Whatever 2026 might have in store, I hope that you're able to wind up somewhere that brings you joy. But that is it for the game animation of 2025. And I have it on good authority that new video games continue to be released in 2026 despite everything. So I guess my work begins anew. Many thanks, as always, to my patrons for their support and their patience, and to you as well for watching this thing. Until next time,